caught a form, so it upon my feet. You know that ghost is me, and I could never be set free as long as I'm a ghost that you can see.
All right, John, thank you. Excellent. Hello, everyone. I know that in the LinkedIn promotion of today's call, there were thousands of people that were highly interested in what's going on. So maybe we'll get a great audience. I see folks coming in. So we have a great guest speaker on Pat Kennedy today, and I'll get back to him in a moment. But John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. I watched the debates last night, and I thought they were very, very interesting as to what went on. If you look at the juxtaposition of politics, if you will, and current events in the country, and it was from a professor's point of view, it wasn't. I couldn't really grade it at a high level, but certainly that also is an indicator of where we are in the great country of America today. As we look around the world, I had great classes this morning at UT, and the kids talked about the debate, and they worried about this and they worried about that. But what I've been doing is to really analyzing and trying to understand where we are in terms of all of the events happening in the country, and juxtapose that to the leadership that we have in the country, and that's both local leadership and national leadership. And try to put it all together. So it's been quite an interesting week.
Yeah. Llewelyn, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. I'm going to leave you in a moment and come back in because I lost the picture. But meanwhile, I also watched the debate. I thought it was a dog fight. I thought one dog had a little more pedigree than the other dog, but nonetheless, it was a battle between curs.
Absolutely. And our guest speaker today, Pat Kennedy, is an old-time Jayhawk like me, and happy to have him join us. And Pat has been running around changing the world for some 40 plus years, and he started in the sort of the chemical industrial process realm, and then went across the world in attacking all kinds of industries and helping the world become digital before anybody thought what it was. And he's the founder and CEO of OSIsoft. And most recently, congratulations, Pat. His company has been acquired by Schneider Electric for $5 billion. So we're honored to have you. Pat, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Well, great to have you today. And we're looking forward to your comments and insights both as a thought leader, as an industry luminary, but more importantly, perhaps as a citizen. So the industry's, transformation in the industry is moving forward at a great pace. Obviously, we review COVID numbers, and the numbers are trending down, both on death and cases overall nationwide. The death number is 200,598 as of just a few hours this morning, and the total case is 7 million plus. We continue to see self-opening all over. In some states, full openings. And obviously back to school is on, and John just mentioned a little bit about the UT, and here at Texas State we are almost back as normal. Some classes are hybrid, but there is some 7,000 students on campus out of the 40,000, and they alternate when they come and go, and lots of things going on, and in interesting times. We see that football is back, which is fantastic. And the fact that the Big Ten and the Pac-10 reversed their not having seasons I think is a great thing. And I personally enjoy the Longhorns victory on Saturday. I thought that was a beyond spectacular game coming from behind. Unfortunately, the Cowboys couldn't pull that off, but that's another story. And so I'd love to get your take on those things, plus the economy in general. Stock market is up and the Dow is up 900 points. The New York Stock Exchange Index is up 200 points, and NASDAQ is up 500 points from last week. Crude oil prices are up almost to $39, up $1.69, which is a good thing for local production companies. And amazingly so, the price of gas went down 8 cents from last week. It's at $1.64. So if you want to get a pickup truck and drive around the country, it's pretty cheap. So Pat, what do you think of what's going on in the country? The economy, the comeback, the COVID, has this impacted, OSIsoft, and how do you see it?
Well, it's about 14 questions. Let me answer a couple of them. What I think about it is that I've had some doubts on whether politicians can actually run the country or not, and I think now my opinion there is getting firmer and firmer. But I'm an engineer, so I deal with bits and bytes, and they don't tend to change. Mm-hmm. So we're still going along. Fortunately, in our business, a surprising number of people really don't need to be in the office to work, which is fairly unusual. But we're basically a software business, so everything from marketing to programming, and surprisingly, even sales. Works fairly well across the little tube. And consider that I actually sold my company using Zoom in this last 6 months, and it's great. You can be sitting there in your chair, and this is my dining room, and no, I don't play the piano. And you sit there and you can talk to people in Hong Kong and Europe and whatever, and basically never leave your desk. The other advantage is that we tend to be on time. So we schedule an hour, we talk an hour. So that's amazingly efficient.
Right.
As far as the actual business, we can talk about it later, but I think every pundit out there has so underestimated the effect of having all these data available to make them more powerful. I think everybody has underestimated it, and I think we're starting to see only the first few little percent right now, and we'll see a lot in the next couple of years.
Yeah. John, any thoughts, comments, or questions for Pat?
Yeah, I think it's Patrick is exactly. I mean, and he's correct. And if you look at what is happening, and we've talked about how business models have changed. Well, let's talk about the virus. I think that I feel a deja vu. I think we will probably have another outbreak because there's nothing about the movement of time that solves problems, except that we might have a nice shot for the virus. But I'm a little hesitant about all of the openings up, and we should see some outbreaks before the vaccination tend to get here. In terms of the business models, and congratulations on selling your company. I sold mine 3 years ago. It's a wonderful feeling. I know the feeling. It's a great feeling. But if you look at the business model, Patrick, what we've talked about is how things will change. So you gave a litany of great things about being on Zoom, one of which is being on time. And then also Texas here, I think, Andreas, we got about 51% of the people can also work at home. Right. So I think you hit the sweet spot of what Llewelyn and Andreas and I have been talking about. As you gave the litany as to what's great about Zoom, the other question is, how will it change society? What does it mean for everyone? What does it mean for work in the future? What does it mean for people in the gig economy? What does it mean for people who do not work, with the plows and the other things of engineering? And so these are interesting kinds of things. So I think that my big concern with the virus, to reiterate, is that I don't think it's over. I think it's far from over. I think we will have another outbreak. The question is, will we shut down? I too am concerned, Patrick, with the leadership of the country, in the sense of understanding that we have different segments of the government And like you, I think that as we would say in Texas, excuse me, Llewelyn, as we say in Texas, you know, merchants run Texas and not the politicians. So those are my comments, Andres.
Yeah, yeah, Llewelyn?
I hardly have the temerity to say anything after John. However, I shall steel myself and forge ahead. Particularly, I'm struck by the comments of the 19th century British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli that we have become two nations, two societies. I think that's happening now with an alarming speed in which we are dividing between those who are really doing quite well and think of them basically as the remote workers. The remote workers are doing just fine. I'm a remote worker. I don't terribly like it because I'm a social animal. I like to chat and shout across the room and generally do everything except the work. Now I have no option but to do the work, which I find extremely exhausting and tedious and possibly unnecessary, as I got here without having to sit by myself at a computer. But those of us, in the nation who are not able to work remotely, are also those who are generally on the wrong side of the digital divide and on the wrong side of the social divide. They are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this pandemic. They are the ones who are losing the highest proportion of their numbers, especially African Americans. They are the ones who have lost jobs irrevocably, jobs that are not coming back, jobs that were already under some threat from digitization, now accelerating, an accelerated threat, which is coming down on them at a terrible way and in a ghastly way, and which is really not well reported or well understood. They are the obvious people you see who are hurting those in the hospitality industry, but many of the service industries, many of the meet the public jobs are just gone and will not recover. In your thing which you send out with the news of the day, Andres, it points out that the people claim that 60% of the companies that are now shuttered will never open.
Mm-hmm.
Their employees, I would venture without great knowledge, are people on the wrong side of the digital divide. Mm-hmm. People for whom the future is very bleak and people who are not much recognized by the political establishment, by that ghastly section of people we call thought leaders, because the thought leaders aren't thinking and we are ignoring a very critical part of our nation. I keep hearing about think tanks, and I think it would be wonderful if the people in the think tanks would try thinking. They would look at the nation and see that all is not well, and going forward, for maybe a third of the people, maybe that many, things are bleak and getting worse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pat, any other thoughts on this as you heard John and Llewelyn chime in?
Well, I think just the saw that we hear a lot, you know, this virus, until we get rid of it, we're basically stuck, and we can speculate on how to come out of it. But I've been inside for 7 months. It's just not worth dying over, so I don't go out.
Right.
So we got to get rid of the virus. We got to get it down, and then we can start talking about recovery. From a technological point of view, there's adequate innovation going on. The jobs can be recreated. We can do all that, but we can't do anything if half the nation has to stay outside in this really hostile environment, and the other half just sit at the little TV sets. So really, we got to get rid of the damn thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, hopefully that'll work out, right? But what if it doesn't? What is the plan if it doesn't? Do we have a plan for society if it doesn't? and what if this virus in its current form of attack is just the beginning of a fury of even worse viruses coming in the next 10 years? We don't know that, right? So it's really fascinating what's going on. And you know, so I keep looking at the tail of the industry and the world as advancement of deals and transformation and technology keeps floating forward, right? So T-Mobile, that acquired Sprint not too far ago, just released announced the deployment of 210 cities with 2.5 gigahertz frequency, leveraging their 5G technology. So now all these phones have, 1.9, 2.5, 800, 900. I mean, it's just more and more and more. So 5G is about to burst. Everybody's waiting for the iPhone and other phones to get announced pretty soon. And clearly 5G is going to take over. And in conjunction with 5G, we have this little effects going on, right? So the fact that we use primarily Wi-Fi, in my house, they're all cute, don't know anything about wireless. They say that Wi-Fi is the internet, right? And so to most people, having access to Wi-Fi is having access to the world. And Verizon just debuted or announced an all-in-one 5G home receiver, like a hockey puck, that you buy for $600. And then it broadcasts Wi-Fi. And so if you live in the middle of nowhere today, and you only have Dish or DirecTV or some other, mediocre internet provider service, now if you can have 5G nearby, because most cell phones have reach everywhere, now all of a sudden, instead of having mediocre access of 20 megabits per second, with 5G, you get 1 gigabit per second, 1,000 megabits per second. And all of a sudden you're in the middle of nowhere, and now you feel like you are in the middle of a city and you have great service. And so that transformation is continues to accelerate. And more importantly, now we're talking about Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi 6 got released not too long ago, and it's starting to be the predominant horse, if you will. Wi-Fi 6 is basically 802.11ax, which has a maximum speed of 10 gigabits per second. And Wi-Fi 7 just got announced. It's in the lab. It hasn't been out at all, but it's been announced in the lab and it's standard. And it's going to give us 46 gigabits per second. That is 40,000 megabits per second in the home on speed, right? So when it comes to connectivity, access to the world, moving bytes, ones and zeros. Pat, we talk a lot about the fact that 5G and Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 6 is building a new highway, a new super highway for the world to function. What's your take on the fact that you have been in this journey for a long time, and how do you see the importance of connectivity and the pervasiveness of that connectivity at a very affordable price for the whole world to enable, digitalization of everything? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I have to say my experience is more in the industrial application area of what we're doing for our production of foods and materials, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I'm not really that familiar with the effect on people. I read about the digital divide, and I can imagine my son has really lousy internet reception through a fluke of where he's located, and that really is a disadvantage for these to happen. But in the industrial world, in a way, if you look at things like the global warming, it's like the virus in the people world. These are things that just got to be gotten rid of, or somehow tamed down, or somehow managed, or we're not going to be able to even see the benefits of going out and having this great network. And that's what I see, is that we have a lot of work to do. Some of it's highly technical, some of it's people, human, get rid of the polarization, find a way to compensate for the fact that so many people are now out of work, or the ones that are working, maybe the jobs aren't quite as good as they were.
Right.
And we just have to get rid of the underlying problems first. And I just don't, I see some of these things as being really, really difficult in solutions.
But real quick, Pat, you know, I think that the divide applies to both industry and people. I mean, when you think about ag and all the places that need to be automated, so 5G and the proliferation of 5G coming at 1,000,000 miles an hour and providing service everywhere, the notion of Internet of Things, primarily for Industry 4.0. I mean, you have been helping certain sectors of industry. Do you see this becoming an incredible opportunity, a 10x opportunity, as every industry will want to replicate what you have been able to help your customers accomplish over the last 10, 15 years?
Well, I think certainly, and there's some big targets to look at. You know, we have, what, 40% of our food supply we ruined from rotting. A lot of that is an information disruption problem. We just don't know that it's been sitting there too long. We don't know which truck to take and which truck not to take.
Right.
So as we start to fuel more and more of our decision process, our planning, scheduling, there's some pretty big targets that we could aim for. And I do see this changing. As far as the divide goes, yes, I do see that. I keep in mind that at one time, 90% of all websites came out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And so we see now as things spread out and we get further afield, you have to ask the question, well, what's this next generation doing? Where is it located? What effect is it going to have on the population? And I keep going back to these plots that show like adoption curve for the telephone or whatever that take 30, 40, 50 years. You think about IoT and its effect. If you agree with the idea that full adoption of technology is a 30-year phenomenon, that means that everything we're going to see in our entire lives are here right now, and we just have to get better at recognizing them. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with this information flow. You can't see it, so we forget about it. But just having the knowledge is really a very powerful thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Llewelyn.
Yes, Pat, I do so agree with you that the major thing is to get the virus behind us. And I have great confidence that we will. The time frame I'm less confident about. I think we have to look at epidemics of the past, diphtheria, of course, polio. If we throw science the way we are throwing science at this problem, it will triumph. It has always triumphed. There is no reason to believe we cannot go after the virus. I've talked to a lot of researchers working on this, different aspects of it. It is possible to defeat it. We're getting better at therapies for dealing with it, but that is not a solution. I would like to just be absolutely sure that people believe that science will deal with this, because it will. It always has. We know a great deal about the virus now, more than we did back in February. Every day we're learning more. There are many companies with a lot of talent working on an immunization, and we've got to believe that one of them will be effective. But it won't, as the president has suggested, probably be next month, October, tomorrow, and it won't be probably delivered to all the individuals who need to get it for quite a long time. The general consensus is that some people, I would count myself among them, will run out to get inoculated. Others will hold back to see if everyone gets, who has been inoculated, if they're all right. They didn't pick up the virus as an unintended consequence of the inoculation. And then we have the anti-mask people, the people who are running around the streets, refuse to wear masks, take it to be somehow an intrusion into the pursuit of liberty if they don't wear a mask, which is in fact the pursuit of death. And is extremely foolish, because it's not just death for themselves, but death for other people. But we're going to get over this, Pat. We're going to get past it. But when we've gotten past it, we've got to look at the society as a whole and see who is being left behind by technology, or who is being excluded by the advances in technology, especially digital technology, and get them on board. I'm not sure how to do it, but I think it behooves us to be mindful that right after we've conquered the virus, we better look hard at who suffered the most and offer them some succor.
Yeah.
And this is a great conversation, because earlier Andrea said, what would the world look like? And Pat said, well, we're moving toward it already. That is, what's interesting about the virus, if you look at, I guess, Timothy Child's book on precision, we're already creating great jobs. We're already moving that way. The adoption rate, I think, would be say much quicker, of course, than the telephone and the automobile and et cetera. So what's interesting that I see is going on is, on the one hand, we have all of these problems in society, which we've had. The technology, 5G, will be at 6G, et cetera. Technology is providing new opportunities. And as those opportunities develop, then any kind of divide will get greater. And then, of course, if you look at the scale of things, as the adaptation continues in the future, then the Kosmersky curve says that it should come back together. So I think that technology, if we put this in the context of all of the great technologies that changed Western society, from the printing press, right, to the telephone, from horses and buggies to the combustion engine, typewriters, we've always been engaged in a process of technological change, not just the change itself, but those technologies that really change business models. So I think what we're doing, if you were to wake up right now and say, what century are you in? Well, if you could transport yourself, back to electricity and the lighting of Chicago with Tesla and those kind of things, but you would ask the same kind of question. So as we wake up at this point in the 21st century, then we're in that process, but it is much faster now. It is moving so much faster. The wealth will be created so much faster. We don't have to dig holes anymore. We don't have to dig for oil and petroleum. We don't need boats and ships to transport things. We are in an intellectual, data-driven society that will create jobs and create wealth. So what's interesting is nothing stops. It's always in the becoming. And I think the virus has speeded things up. But as Llewelyn would say, people would get left behind. And as Patrick would say, the opportunities will be fabulous, and there will be a lag that will have an impact on people as we move forward.
Yeah. Let me pause here real quick to do my traditional 30-second commercial on our Digital 360 Summit. So most of you know that we had our annual event in August of this year. It was our Zoom event, and it was fantastic. And we had, great attendance and great speakers like John and Llewelyn. And here's a list of companies that participated and spoke. We had 900 registered attendees and some 84 speakers from these companies. And so we announced a couple of weeks ago our 2021 edition, which will be at the Embassy Suites in San Marcos, May 18th, 19th, and 20th. And we are shooting for 80 plus speakers and 1,000 attendees, 16 keynotes, 11 panels on all those verticals. And so we want to thank Texas State University for sponsoring the Digital-Roundtable and our break to announce and share the news on the latest on Digital 360 Summit. So I wanted to make a point on what's happening on smart buildings in smart cities in terms of access to internet. So amazingly so, this is a data from the federal government, just came out yesterday, 42%, remember that number, 42% of US broadband households now own a connected health device. So that doesn't mean that there are only 42% US households that have broadband. That number is roughly 80% or maybe 85%. But of that number, 42% own a medical health device connected where they're being monitored. It could be your Apple Watch or it could be another device. And so health management or health monitoring or wellness, if you will, seems to be one of the largest beneficiaries. And when it comes to companies, I see that a lot of companies are starting to issue devices to their entire employee pool to reduce their premiums on insurance, because now those employees are getting tracked on their, blood, oxygen count in their blood, or their, heart rate, or what have you, their temperature, their, all those things. So it's really fascinating where things are heading, right? And there are many angles and benefits to this. And for another important data point that just came out yesterday, it is expected the final impact of COVID-19 on spending on smart home technologies is that smart home technology market is going to grow roughly $85 billion in the United States alone. So while people are sitting at home doing nothing, perhaps working out and building a new deck or things like that, they're buying more smart home equipment, and homes are getting smarter, and everybody's using Zoom. And so clearly, as people are now working from home, and the home and work have blurred the lines of how productivity in your time is being managed, I think that has a great impact into how we accelerate digitization and how new business models emerge from that. So Pat, when you decided to do OSIsoft 40 years ago, very forward thinking of you to say, look, I see this, and maybe you can share for a couple of minutes how the beginning and the end of the whole thing, but you said, look, there are some processes that are not working well, they're manual driven. I can write a software algorithm to innovate that. And now you push forward 40 years later, and none of your customers could live a moment without your software, right? So how do you equate your own mini journey, which is a fantastic success story of the American dream, of a guy that went to Kansas for college, and how do you equate that to what's really happening in the world is forcing itself onto people to reinvent themselves, to think of new ways of thinking, find new problems, come up with new answers. What's your take on that journey?
Well, first of all, it was evolutionary. In 1980, we thought we were going to go out and do advanced controls. Sounds good, and particular in refining. And these big units in the refinery, they don't want computers to control them. They basically were kind of hostile to us. And we went out there to try to do our work, and there was no data. And let me take you back to the time, 1980, Microsoft was 1978, the PC came out in 1982. Mm-hmm. So the only computers you had were these big honking departmental computers that basically could print out reports for people. Most of the data that people really need were on log sheets, and you had to sit there and basically type it in. So we originally built the system not as a software package. We built it for our own use. Through various historical facts, we were programmers. We knew how to program. I won't tell you, well, I will tell you the language. It was Fortran 2 was the first language I learned. But, we built the system for ourselves. And then as we started to expand, the people that we would sell to wanted to buy our system instead of buying our services. So we changed business models and said, okay, we can do this as a model, a refinery information system, because our expertise was refining. Mm-hmm. But then because I knew people in pulp and paper, they would say, well, you can use it over here too. And so we expanded to pulp and paper, and we just kept expanding. And I actually produced a curve the other day just because I wanted to, but it's like a 38-year curve that shows a very, very steady increase. And it's just a matter that data became more and more useful. And now people knew about it. There's a 1960 book by Emmanuel Savas that says there's 3 flows in a plant. There's processed material, there's energy, and there's information. And if you disrupt any of those flows, you get the same effect. So we knew that there was information flow and we knew about it, but there just weren't the sensors then. And if you go back and remember that time in around 1970, so only 10 years in, was when the digital instrumentation started to come out. And so we started digitizing all this information. And that's really the key technology that drove stuff. It wasn't our cleverness or our controls or whatever. It was the fact that by digitizing it, it became useful to anybody that wanted to link in. Right. And that's when we found one of the basic axioms of data. Data is one of the few resources that the more people that consume it, the more valuable it gets. And so as we started building out, we built to what we have today. I have 1,500 people, and we have systems, you know, tens of thousands of systems and sites all over the world in nearly every industry you can think of. Why are people doing this? It's pretty straightforward. Go back to that axiom that the more people that can consume data, the more valuable it gets. And take the word people out and put in applications. So the more people, the more applications that utilize this information, the more valuable it gets. And so people learned how to look at equipment health. They learned how to look at supply chain. They learned how to look at planning, scheduling, modeling, digital twin, you name it, it keeps on going. And what I see now, as I said, I think people have underestimated the effect of this IoT, because IoT is simply the next stage of digitization. So now instead of just having the stuff from the instrument system, you have all these other sensors that people put in. And then you have processing at the edge. So now things like cameras that were basically great for a picture can now be your sensor. They can look for everything from temperature profiles to movement to whatever. And so we're on a curve now, and there's no question in my mind it's going to happen. And the driving force are these underlying things. The COVID virus of the industrial world is probably global warming. We got to solve that problem before we can start doing anything else. How do you solve it? Well, first of all, people argue about global warming. Let me change the word for you. Don't call it global warming, call it conservation. Now nobody argues. Just don't use it in the first place. And right. How do you do that? You do that by using information to better allocate your resources around.
So don't you think, before these guys chime in, don't you think that the answer to all these problems, no matter what, are really, let's put more sensors everywhere and apply machine learning and AI and algorithms to learning what's going on, whatever is going on, and then we'll get the data and fix it?
Machine learning is one of those users. Keep in mind, you don't have to do machine learning to use data.
Right.
The largest selling product we have is a spreadsheet add-in that simply puts data in front of people. And let me call that natural intelligence. But then the sophisticated ones, the ones that are looking for failure and taking response, maybe that's artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. But the key is, with data, you don't have to decide between one and the other. You do them all. Right. And every one of them has an incremental value. I've been doing this now for 50 years. And I've never seen an instance where the value of what you do doesn't increase with the scope. Right. So now what's happening today that's unusual is not just having IoT, it's the fact we have it everywhere. And so the scope of data we have to do our business, it's just getting larger and larger and larger. So doing things like being able to manage the grid in the face of all these renewables going up and down, doing things like being able to attack the transportation problems that have us sitting on the bloody roads all the time. These are now much better handled with the data we have coming in. And now you see people building the tools to take advantage of that data.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that.
Go ahead, John.
I think that also what Andreas added to the equation was the internet of people. And I always said the following. I think that the last century was computer science, engineering, and sensors. And this century will be a combination of biology and those things. If you look at the investments in Silicon Valley in what we call the life sciences, the investment in what we call the extension of life, and when Andrea said that all homes have a biological component to them that's measured by the Internet of Things, then the new industries, the new wealth will be around biology. And so the old professor here from Texas saying that biology is a new frontier. And when I say it is a new frontier, I mean everybody will be able to choose how they want to look, and the fact they want to look like me is another issue. People will be able to choose how their body will respond. They will be able to choose their body type. We have the everything's already mapped out, and we're learning more about the genome. And if you look at all of the research, what's interesting to me is that professors in pharmacy, for example, are using the tools of engineering at the nano level so that we can have an engine that's as small as the fingernail on my hand. And of course, all of this will produce data, but let's have a cautionary tale here. Data itself needs a theory to go along with the data. So when Patrick was in school at Kansas, and I was in school at Northwestern, we knew that there was something called data in and data out, a garbage in and garbage out. So I wonder what percentage of that data will be useful to human beings. We can understand industry because industry knows how to create the algorithms, the predictive equations, run the hypotheses, run all of those things for prediction. Now, when you add the human body into all of these things, it's going to be much like if God had intended us to fly, he would have made an airplane. Or if God had intended for Texans to ski, he would have made bullshit white. It's the same kind of different kinds of things that we do. So I think that the data themselves are very, very important. But look at this, computer science, which to me is Aristotle's logic, if P then Q. When I was in college, we called it logic. There would be a great marriage between biology, and biology is a science that will produce the wealth in the future.
That is extraordinarily interesting. And I also, by the way, John, Texas didn't need mountains to go downhill.
That's just wrong.
That is well said from somebody who lives in East Texas.
Let me ask Patrick a question. I'm very excited when you brought into this conversation conservation, as we're now calling it. But after the virus, we have to deal with global change and the weather. And data is going to be essential to that. Now, I was listening last night when we had this something of a dispute within the dispute on the television between the candidates about what we're going to do with buildings, how we're going to make them more efficient and therefore save a lot of energy and a lot of pollution, which seemed to me very reasonable, but I did not hear a solution. As I understand it, the democratic approach is to have the government intrude. My feeling is the technology has reached the stage, and there are enough companies, maybe including our own, Patrick, that will take these solutions to the building owners because it's a good business deal on both sides. And that we're trying to hothouse something that is going to take care of itself because suddenly the environment is good business. We've seen this in the past where the government comes too late to something. Aeroderivative turbines, which have changed the provision of electricity by the use of turbines with natural gas much more efficient. The government jumped in later and started studying turbines, which of course they'd studied elsewhere for the military, but they started studying them in the civilian way. But it wasn't necessary. General Electric and other turbine manufacturers were there offering their machines to the utilities, and it was a tremendous revolution. Are we at a point where data will produce so much information about buildings where the course of action will be obvious and profitable?
I had lunch once with the CEO of our California ISO. ISO is it's like your ERCOT. It's basically where power is bought and sold. And they asked him, what would you want more than anything if you could have anything you want? And he said, what I'd really like is I'd like the buildings to start to respond before I'm in trouble. If you look at the way we've set things up so that we can do it administratively with laws and rules, we basically have a mechanism of controlling the power onto the grid that's a day-by-day mechanism. And if you're making a change every day to something that moves at the speed of light, then there's some issues with that. But if you looked at the buildings, why shouldn't the buildings be able to see that there's a problem and start to respond? I mean, you don't have to treat the electricity used to light your parking lot the same as you treat the electricity that runs your air conditioners, the same one that runs your fire pumps. I mean, there's no difference in reliability. So to create these multiple reliabilities takes information, and then it takes logic, and it takes software to do that. So I believe that the technology to actually address a good chunk of this problem exists today. And in many ways, it's overcoming the help that we're getting from the regulations rather than it's actually more regulations needed. And, you know, we will see these solutions start to appear. And I could actually name the solutions that would address that particular problem, but every one of these big problems, there's solutions lying around. What's been missing is for there to be enough scope to make any difference.
Yeah.
But now if you look at handling millions of buildings, now you get to where you can really have an effect.
Yeah, I also think that it's important to remember that any place that is a system where it's delivering a commodity, gas, water, power, anything like that, railroads, what have you, that while there is a significant amount of automation, we still have not been able to convince those in the control room that are running the system to actually trust the machines to make the decisions. The only place where that happens today is the fact that jets, airline jets, fly themselves. They land and take off on their own. The pilots actually don't have to do a thing. But even in the towers where traffic control is being managed, human beings, just like on the grid and the power grid and the water grid and the gas grid, human beings are still the ones calling the shots. And somehow, generationally, or for some reason, back to the old days of Pat not being treated right by those folks, it's still the case. It's still the case that there are no single system that is managing everything without a human watching it. And so that I think that culture change is one of the big hurdles of going forward. But I wanna get your point, your comments on a couple more things. On, again, this last week has been a tremendous week on new improvements on digital transformation milestones. So you probably know, and this is big into you, Pat, and I wonder if you're the driver of an electric vehicle, but California just mandated that no more only electric vehicles going forward after 2035. So basically, if you have not bought shares in Tesla yet, you better buy shares in Tesla, because California just basically killed the internal combustion engine. And by 2035, all cars will be electric in California. So Tesla doesn't really have to sell cars in all of America to be successful. They're already selling cars in California, and they're going to have, #1 market share in the California market. And so you know, what's your take on electric vehicles, Pat? And the fact that if you had to pick something to get rid of CO2 and fix climate change, if you could convert all the cars to being electric, we would be there. And the end of the game over, we won. CO2 is out. What's your take on California making that mandate?
I heard a politician once say there are no solutions, there's only choices.
Okay.
So when we choose to go with electric vehicles, we also have to have the electricity to run them, which, by the way, is all done with natural gas. So instead of burning natural gas into a power plant, put it on the grid, run it over to your charger, put it into your car, charge your car and drive. You know, if you really wanted to save the world, what you do is you put LPG in your car. So, you know, these are all these choices. And the bottom line is that as we say, okay, now it's good we best generate all our power from solar and from wind, and that's going to solve everything. You know, if you talk to people in the power industries, they don't use the word renewable, they use the word intermittent. Right. Because the sun goes down, the power goes away. Probably not a more important announcement, but a really important announcement was about a week ago, also by Tesla. What they announced was a new form factor for the battery that's going to drop the cost of stationary batteries down underneath $100 a kilowatt hour.
Correct.
As soon as that happens, and actually even today, that means every building's going to have their own battery storage. It means every home's going to have their own storage. And now what you can do is you can change the variability to where you can just run your turbines at a very constant speed. And what that does for you, if you have a little capstone turbine in your backyard, it struggles to get to 20% efficient. If you have a J series turbine for a combined cycle, it's 63%. So go back to the conservation. The way to conserve is to take that variability out of the grid, let the buildings respond, let the turbines line out, and bring the efficiency up on the grid. So we have solutions, and politicians' solutions, I don't know. They force us to think. They cause a crisis, and you never waste a good crisis. But I don't really have an electric car. I have a Lexus.
Okay. Guys, any comments on the mandate on electric cars and what could happen in the rest of the U.S.?
This is what I don't think should happen. I'm a big enthusiast and have been for electric vehicles for 40 years, but I don't think mandates are the way to go. I think the market would have got us there anyway. It's going to have Tesla as the option. You already have other cars as the option. You've got a flood of high-end cars, electric cars coming in from Europe. We're going to get them out of Detroit. So there are going to be lots of electric cars, and the changeover is going to be driven by the market. I don't think the mandates help. I think they distort the market. The government is very good at pulling, saying where it wants you to go, but let you get there, let the market get you there. I think that it's pushing, and I think that's the wrong way to go. I think we're going to get building conservation. I think we're going to get electrification and transportation because it's appealing, it's cheaper, and people are going to vote with their dollars for it.
I agree.
If I could add one thing to your story on electric vehicles, if I could take my electric vehicle, plug it into my charger, and let it participate with the other million electric vehicles in California to use its battery storage to stabilize the grid, I can now use that data twice.
Right.
Then I can use it 3 times. And now your market really starts to dominate because the cost of everything goes down.
Right.
It's coming. Yesterday I made a television program with 2 consultants from Guidehouse talking just about things like that, using this huge resource of 1 million and eventually many tens of millions of batteries as the nation's storage for electricity. But they all have to be connected, and they have to communicate, and you're so absolutely right, Patrick.
Well, Andreas and his 5G will connect everything for us.
Andreas and his 5G is going to clean my teeth, make my bed, my God, I don't know what I'll do. Functions left whatsoever.
John?
Yeah, I also think that as my colleague Llewelyn has said, there'll be lots of car makers. I mean, I think that there'll be lots of car makers, and Tesla will have lots of competition. When the first iteration of that car, it would change tremendously. California is always ahead and mandating things, and that means we should expect the movement of people out of California to Texas to increase, as it has done over the last, Patrick, number of years. But let's just say, stop and say something about demand and supply, what people would do. And I think you're right, it's definitely the market. And it was also the switching costs related to the market. As you would say, every hotel, every parking lot, there will be a plug-in. So I think we're due for a big change, but again, the change is always happening, is already happening. As I look at my neighborhood, and Patrick, I also drive a Lexus, a LC 500, I might add. If you look at my neighborhood, there are lots and lots, if you will, of electric cars, and they are literally everywhere. So I think that change is happening now, but I think it will be driven by the market for sure. But the big thing is there'll be lots and lots of people making electric cars, because remember, they're far more easier to manufacture than my car that has 1 billion parts to it. So the supply chain will be completely different for this huge golf cart that we call an electric car.
Yeah. So Pat brought up a point on the Tesla announcement, and the details of that is that Tesla unveiled a new EV battery design where he guarantees that the price of the kilowatt hour, which in 2019 for his batteries was $127 per kilowatt, is going to go all the way down to $56 per kilowatt hour by 2023. So we wish him good luck, primarily because, you know, Pat, you may know that the next gigafactory is being built in Austin, and Tesla is going to make the Cybertruck in Texas, and we both UT and Texas State and other universities are already working with Tesla, and we foresee a fury of innovation on electrification of transportation coming out of Texas. Not because it's the green thing to do or because it's the paranoid CO2 thing to do, but because it is the right thing to do to make big money with the new business models.
And cheaper.
And capitalism will win once again, driven from Texas. But I want to share with you guys a couple points on and get your take on. So one interesting data point, and I've been talking a lot about the democratization of wireless technologies as the federal government with the FCC and this administration has been aggressively selling, the spectrum real estate, if you think of it as real estate. And so there's a technology, there's a spectrum called CBRS, which is in the 3.6 gigahertz that had been in auction all over the place. And actually you can get, but at the county level, you can get your own license and manage it in your own sort of a footprint, if you will, of your, however many acres you own. And so in McAllen, Texas, they had always had terrible access to the internet, and the carriers, because it was a depressed market with 76% poverty, the Verizon and AT&T, they just, could care less about McAllen, Texas. So the city of McAllen and this independent school district of McAllen applied for a CBRS license. And they apply it, they bought it using money that came from the CARES Act related to COVID, which is legal for the cities to use. So Pat, they bought the license and deployed a network in their city for $6 million. And now they offer broadband at 10 gigabits per second to all their citizens for free. Now, think about what that means, gentlemen, in terms of leapfrogging, innovation, learning, school, you know, transactions, market, making money. I mean, commerce, right? It's the beginning of what I've been talking about, the fact that 5G applied to all this new renaissance of wireless technologies is going to reinvent the ability to have what all the rich people and all the universities have always had, and you can have it in your backyard at no cost.
Andre, yeah, one of the interesting things that you're talking about is that we've always said in an interesting way that if you could digitize something, it will be free. And the question is, what's the free business model? There are lots of free business models. Television was a free business model. They gave you the content and advertise. Facebook is a free model where they give you the content and they advertise. But as the technology becomes a commodity, then the notion of change and investment, all of that changes. So the fact that if you're a musician now, for example, and when the internet came out, you don't have to go through the radio anymore. In a real sense, you know, it's all free. I can go download it, you know, from Apple. So I think all of these changes where as things become digitized, then is there a law that says that the more we digitize, the more the commodity becomes free? So therefore it brings in the notion, what's the free model? Can we depend upon advertising as a free model? The other model, of course, is to just give it away free, and as you give it away, actually attach other things to it and bring you in as a customer later on. So all the things that we've talked about on this program, if you will, about the impact of 5G, 6G, and et cetera, is very, very interesting. But what we got to talk about is 5G, China, and the future.
Right. Llewelyn?
Well, I'm not sure whether your localized endeavor to bring broadband really will presage a change. I remember when there was a lot of thrill about low power radio. Radio was going to be everywhere, and it really didn't take off at all. And we have the so-called PEG stations. I'm glad to say I often carry my program. Many areas carry my television program when PBS doesn't carry it. But there's a problem with those. In many areas, they've been taken over by nutters, by very fringe religious group, because it's free. And suddenly everybody thinks they have something to say. And the result is that this service is wasted. It's unless you've got very tight station management with the preparedness to say no, you end up with the lowest common denominator and nobody watches it. So you've got to be a little careful of what you get for free. You probably get nothing. But I do like what John just said about how what else it brings in, how it becomes a magnet and brings in collateral things anticipated initially. And that's very exciting. I'm always interested in collateral development. I cite, for example, don't try to answer all the questions when you develop something. Let somebody else develop the things around the periphery. A case in point, the Wright brothers were not trying to invent anything. They were just trying to fly. They were to invent new materials, radar, high tensile alloys, aluminum skins. They let other people do that. And I think John is quite right. You go ahead with your central purpose and the other things will come along. I would though point out that different employment ahead. Patrick very wisely points out that it's a lot easier to service and indeed to make an electric car. I think people will be printing in their home with additive manufacturing, printing cars. Not all the mechanics, not the motor, but certainly the body. It's very doable. But down the way, as we go electric, you lose all those jobs at the service station.
Oh, we lost him. We lost him.
That's the first time we lost.
I think somebody in the deep space is listening, didn't like what he was saying, and he got cut off.
I think he might come back, huh?
Hey, Patrick, give us your final thoughts as we wrap up. What will you say going forward? You know, it's been a great journey for you. You have helped the world become a better place, no doubt. I would vote for you to get a statue somewhere in Oakland or San Leandro or San Rafael, and I'm sure you have a great thoughts about a foundation and how you contribute to the world going forward. What are your thoughts about, you know, you're sitting in a great place right now, and I know that, you know, maybe you want to do some sightseeing and what have you and decompress, but what a great opportunity to do whatever you want, in the world is like bursting. What are your thoughts on that? And I don't, you know, if you don't want to share, that's okay. But
oh, that's fine. First of all, the first thought is everybody should go out and get their flu shot, because you don't want to have the flu when you get the virus.
Right.
But and we got our nice flu shot. We get the geriatric one that's got 4 times the stuff in it. But anyway, I'm looking forward to basically just seeing how, you know, what's the end result of this stuff. I mean, we've been so long, we've been embedded in the battle that sometimes you can't get up and look at the end result. But, you know, I really like the idea of, you know, healthcare that basically it uses data to make everybody more healthy. I like the idea of transportation that doesn't use the resources it uses today. Yeah. I like the ideas that we can distribute and manage our power systems out there at much lower cost, much higher efficiency. So I'm a hopeless techo geek. I'll probably be doing this for a while, and maybe when the virus goes away, we'll get out and do some more travel and whatever. You know, I will be tired of looking at the inside of my house by then.
Absolutely.
Look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Let Llewelyn finish. Llewelyn must finish.
Llewelyn, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You need to unmute first. Bottom left. There you go.
My computer died on me. It must be interference from Texas. Are you responsible? I don't know. I won't. I'll be hesitant next time I go down to Texas.
I think whatever you...
in Texas, I was even invited to and did address the legislature back in the energy crisis when I was the founder and publisher of the Energy Daily. I was just going to say, as you get this huge change, you get a lot of loss of jobs. Hopefully, if John is right, a lot of new jobs associated with electric vehicles will come along, but they won't be at the Jiffy Lube. Companies like Jiffy Lube should look to a new line of business.
I don't know. Maybe Jiffy Lube can fix batteries. I don't know. You never know.
You don't know. No, you don't know. But there will be, it's not just one huge change, it's multiple changes for multiple careers.
So anyway, we got to wrap it up. And delighted, Pat, that you were with us today, and we wish you well. We would love to stay in touch. I got all kinds of ideas about how you can stay busy helping me build these 9 living labs at Texas State. We have 100 acres, and we're just finished designing the first lab, and all kinds of cool things coming down the pike. So let's stay in touch, and wish you well, and congratulations again for everything. And we're proud of you. And as a Jayhawk, as an American citizen, the hard-working American dream is alive and well.
Thank you.
Very interesting, Pat. Very interesting.
Thank you very much, Pat.
All right, Johnny, take us away.